I have come to Clent Hills with Jake, who is currently taking a photo of me standing in a tree doing this. Yeah, I thought I'd come somewhere else, try and get inspired with a few different shots in this lockdown. This tree is very old. It's also a very good place to actually kind of stand and chill out. You should try it, Jake. It's quite nice up here. So let's talk about changing it up a bit. Recently had the misfortune of my 70-200 having a fault, a focus ring fault, which apparently is quite known on the 70-200s. That's a really loud bird. I've had to send it back. Where we've come to today is one of the places where I practically only use the 70-200, mostly around the 70 range anyway, and being forced to use a different lens has given me some perspective into something that might inspire some creativity if you're in a bit of a rut or break out of the norm. What I would suggest is this. If you're used to shooting telephoto, 70-200, around that kind of range, try a different lens. Mostly use that 70-200 when I'm out taking photos. So I would suggest getting yourself something like the Sigma 10-20 for instance. I'm trying to use this at the moment. I'm having to keep on swapping the adapters, but I'm trying to use this right now to take photos with. I'll drop a couple of them here. It's kind of interesting trying to like frame things differently, think a little bit differently, and not just go for depth of field and all of that kind of stuff. So try and use like a slightly different lens to what you're used to, and you might be surprised. Okay, so I'm back home now. A couple of days have passed and I've had a chance to look at these photos. From the photos that I took whilst I was out, I noticed that because I'm used to shooting with such a long lens, or a longer lens, then it doesn't actually mean it's a really long lens, because there are longer. Anyway, I digress. Because I'm used to shooting with a longer lens than what I was shooting with at the weekend, I noticed that actually it is quite hard to make subjects stand out when you've got such a wide field of view. So I wanted to jump in real quick into Lightroom just to kind of take you through some of the things that I would do in this situation in order to highlight your subject a little bit better, to make them stand out from the background and the rather large kind of canvas that you've given yourself. You've got your shot. You've got this one here, for instance, that I've got of my buddy Jake. This image here, it doesn't really stand out that well. So what I would do in this situation is either use the brush or the radial filter. So a quick thing to do would be to grab a radial filter, to pop it on, drag it over your subject, and you can use more than one if you want to. So for instance here, I will highlight there, and we'll probably, okay, now that kind of looks that the sun is beaming down a little bit. So all I've done there is I've added a radial filter. I've already used this before, and I generally have this just setting the exposure to about +1. You can do other things like increase the clarity, which sometimes helps people stand out, dehaze it a little bit as well, which obviously increases that contrast a little bit. So you can either drag that down to lift the shadows basically, or you can raise it up, which basically pulls the shadows and the blacks down. I have mine inverted because obviously if you don't invert it, it affects everything around it. Okay, so now we take a look at an image that I took of Jake sitting on a bench overlooking, he was sat on a bench on Clent Hill. We'll leave it at that. So what I did here was I added a radial filter onto Jake himself to make him stand out a little bit. Then I also added a gradient filter to the sky to darken the sky, to make everything else seem a little bit moodier, just to kind of fit in with my style, but also it kind of helps accentuate the highlights around Jake as well, like the highlights on the wood, the highlights on Jake's skin. But for me, these are some of the little tweaks that you can do just to help your images actually stand out a little bit more when you're using a bit of a wider lens. Okay, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you found this video somewhat helpful. If you did, don't forget to leave a like, get subscribed and like the bell to stay up to date for whenever I release a new video. And until the next one, see ya.